Hi everyone, this is Ali Hussein Kasim of Ali Talks Tech. Assalamu alaikum, Ramadan Kareem, Sa'um Makbul to all my brothers and sisters in Islam. In this week's weekly roundup of tech news across Africa, I'm covering a couple of interesting stories. The first one is on MTN Group's collaboration with Network International. Come back to that story. The next story is on data privacy in Kenya. There's a landmark ruling with potentially big implications. Then, still in Kenya, critical infrastructure under siege. This is digital public infrastructure, DPI. Then Ghana and Rwanda formally put pen to paper for their fintech licensing, passporting between the two countries. This is an interesting one, and hopefully the rest of the continent will follow suit. So back to MTN Group's fintech collaboration with Network International. Network International is one of the largest fintechs based out of Dubai and covering a lot of countries in the GCC area. That's your Gulf Cooperation Council in the Middle East and in Africa. So, what is this collaboration about? This is about rolling out card issuance products across Africa and Network International being designated as a payment provider or payment processor for MTN Group's fintech arm. Now, you ask yourself, what is this all about? I mean, why is MTN Group or its fintech arm signing this sort of agreement? Isn't mobile money prevalent anywhere in Africa? What's going on here? What's going on here? Let me break it down for you guys. This makes sense because there's a conversation around interoperability and inclusivity. You have mobile money that's obviously very prevalent across Africa, but you also have cards payment. Now, these are two different systems. This partnership should hopefully bring interoperability together and bring some level of inclusivity. There will be mobile money users who may want to use cards and vice versa. And this also brings potentially the majority of mobile money players, mobile money users under the MTN Momo platform, integrated into the global payment ecosystem through the card system that is apparently being provided by MasterCard. Well done, MasterCard. The other thing that makes sense around this is obviously expanding use cases around cards and integration with mobile money. Momo, in this sense, that's the brand name for MTN. I've never understood that Momo thing, but anyway, that's a story for another day. So, for example, if you want to make some payments on the MTN platform and you don't have mobile money, you can use the Network International ecosystem to actually enable to do that. There's also the potential around decreasing fraud prevention and security. Ultimately, this partnership really highlights how essential interoperability is for scaling African financial services. By connecting this mobile money platform with other payment ecosystems, the MTN Group is really looking to enhance its spread and its influence across the ecosystem. So now let's get into the conversation in Kenya around data privacy and a landmark ruling by the Office of the Data Protection Commissioner, which has fined Safaricom and a client, Beckton Dickinson. Sorry, guys. It's English came by ship. So this Dickinson company was fined around 250K each for processing. Now listen to this. Let me read this ruling. Processing a former employee's personal data without consent. Keyword here is without consent. This case raises critical questions about corporate responsibility, data protection, and privacy rights in this digital age. So exactly what happened here. Reading from the script from the Office of the Data Protection, I don't want to miss out any key points here. Catherine Murithi, a former BD employee, discovered that her national ID was shared with Safaricom without her permission to transfer her corporate SIM card back to her personal account after her employment ended. Let me repeat this. This is interesting and strange at the same time. Catherine Murithi, a former BD employee, discovered that her national ID was shared with Safaricom without her permission to transfer her corporate SIM card back to her personal account after her employment ended. The ODPC found this violated Kenya's Data Protection Act, which mandates consent and transparency in data protection. Now, you might ask yourself, wait a minute, wasn't this supposed to benefit this lady? How is it then she went and reported both Safaricom and a former employee? I'm confused here. But why is this important? Number one, this is precedent setting. This ruling reinforces the importance of consent. This is the key issue here. Consent and transparency in handling personal data. It sets a precedent for how companies navigate employee data, especially during transitions. So, will this ruling make companies rethink their internal data practices? I hope my people are not listening to me and setting a trap for me on a light note. But here is the important issue. This is a corporate dilemma. Companies often need to manage this transition. And basically, the issue here is, where do we draw the line between operational needs and privacy needs? In this case, BD argued that the transfer was necessary for offloading the employee from its systems, and it is crucial because that SIM card was being transferred back to her. However, the ODPC emphasized that Muridhi's consent, there's that word again, Muridhi's consent was non-negotiable. So ODPC's role in corporate now, guys are asking, is this overreach or is this necessary enforcement? Some might argue that the ODPC is being too stringent, potentially stifling corporate operations. Others view this as necessary to enforce accountability and protect individual privacy rights. $1 million question. How can regulators balance enforcement with fostering innovation and operational flexibility? How do we balance privacy and corporate rights? So here's my advice for free. This act is very clear. Consent is king. Always seek written approval before processing personal data. I can hear questions. What if she refuses? Just chill, guys. I mean, what's the point of getting your brand all over the place in news, in social media and stuff? Transparency in policies. Clearly communicate how data will be used during onboarding and offboarding processes. So maybe you may seek consent when somebody is signing that appointment letter. Possibly that's an important component going forward. Third, employee awareness. Train staff on data protection laws to avoid unintentional violations. The last one, regulatory collaboration. Very crucial. Engage with regulators like the ODPC to ensure compliance while addressing operational challenges. Here's a footnote to my brother, John Walubengo, who is a deputy commissioner in that seat. Possibly not a bad idea to have these conversations with corporates, have open days, open data days, and stuff like that. Footnote to myself. Possibly there is a potential for a conference on these issues, because 5 years down the line, we seem to still be struggling around this issue. Now, we go to critical infrastructure under siege, Nairobi's governance failure. If you are Nairobian like myself, you are flabbergasted and astounded by last week's shenanigans between the Kenya Power and the Nairobi City governance or government, or as we call them, Kanjo in Nairobi. We woke up to truckloads of rubbish and refuse being dumped on the doorstep of Kenya Power's headquarters in Nairobi. And we started asking ourselves, what the hell is going on? So it happened, apparently, Kenya Power decided to switch off the Nairobi city government for non-payment of power bills spanning over years, going into billions. So what did the Nairobi city government do? Said, oh, you mean you can do that? This is what we're going to do. We're going to block your main doors into your corporate offices with refuse. We are going to go onto your power lines that also support fiber for connectivity, and we're going to bring them down. You've not paid us Waverly. Anyway, long story short, lots of people in Nairobi went without connectivity for some hours, at least at the barest minimum. I understand some estates went without connectivity for days, and I'm not really sure that that issue has been resolved. So there are a couple of things here. First, this gangster behavior from the city government. This is just uncalled for. And I'm just calling out the governor by name, Honorable Sakaja, surely. What is going on? How do we get to this point where we use such tactics? Have a sit down, have conversations. Yeah, these Kenya Power is a quasi-government institution. You guys in government, you cannot have conversations. These silos that get to this point where you are starting to affect critical infrastructure, digital infrastructure in this country, in this city. What sort of face are we giving to our visitors and our investors into the capital city of Nairobi? This is not something that should ever happen again. As I go to press on this, I understand there is some agreement that has been reached, and we hope that remains like that, and we hope that this situation never comes to repeat itself. Last but not least, we are the Africa Fintech Network. FYI, if you didn't know, I am an executive board member of the African Fintech Network, which is a member organization of about 40 national fintech associations across Africa. We are celebrating the putting pen to paper of the first fintech licensing passport between Ghana and Rwanda. This was announced a couple of weeks ago, but during the Inclusive Fintech Festival or Forum last week in Rwanda, this was put to pen and paper. Congratulations to the two countries for bringing the African fintech ecosystem closer together, and we hope that this is something that other countries will be looking at and would be emulating. What does this mean? Really, this streamlines cross-border operations for fintechs operating between these two countries. It creates minimal additional regulatory requirements. If you're a fintech regulated in Ghana, it will be much easier for you to operate in Rwanda with minimal requirements, because the assumption is that the regulators in each one of these countries have already done their homework. Third, innovation growth and promotion. I don't need to belabor that point further. Cross-border payment interoperability will be much easier. And last but not least, we're talking about support for micro, small, medium enterprises operating between these two countries. Kudos to the two countries and to the governors of the central banks of these countries. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, I come to the end of my weekly roundup of news across Africa. Asanteni sana, Saum Makbul to my Muslim brothers and sisters, and speak next week. Asante sana.